Let's come now to transformational theology. We're not going to go through the course. We will look at some pieces here and there in the course for the remainder of the day today. But I want to speak at just sort of a higher level here about this. Transformational theology. This is a big deal. Here's why. In leader development. Big deal in leader development especially. Because in leader development, the people's traditional understanding of how and where leaders are built is what? At the seminary, at the Bible school. And what happens at the seminary or the Bible school?
You learn how to write a paper.
Learn how to write a paper. There's tons of knowledge, books, desks, lectures, exams, grades, that sort of thing. It's very academic. And that's a profound error. Now, over the years, a number of times people have said to me, you know, Malcolm, the 5C4D model, obviously this is really effective for building spiritual life, yeah? Building vision, practical ministry capacity, character building, building relational capacity. But you can't teach doctrine that way. It's really good for, life building. Yeah, we'll give you that. It's great for that. Beautiful. But you can't build doctrine that way. And our leaders need to know the Word. In order to teach doctrine, you have to do that. Books, lectures, papers, exams, that sort of thing, yeah? Do you understand the point there? The idea? And I deeply disagree with that. Deeply. Not only can you teach deep theological doctrine truth in a 5C4D way, in fact, it is the only way to do it. It is the only way to do it. And this is where we've got to change our thinking about the goal of training. Our goal in training is life transformation. That includes deep biblical understanding. I'm very concerned about accuracy in the Scriptures. Deeply concerned about that we and those we train and those they train would have deep knowledge of the teachings of the Bible, the doctrines of the Bible. I'm deeply concerned about that. But if somebody is, let's think about the doctrine of the deity of Christ. That's a beautiful doctrine, right? That's a central doctrine to the Christian faith. Just because I can quote proof texts on the deity of Christ and get an A on my exam and write a beautiful paper about the deity of Christ and get an A on that too, does not mean that I understand the deity of Christ. I only understand the deity of Christ when I am surrendered to Him as God. Then I've got the deity of Christ. Do you understand? I only understand the deity of Christ when I am worshiping Jesus as God. Then I've got the deity of Christ. Yeah? I only understand the deity of Christ when I am trusting the Lord Jesus in the middle of difficult circumstances, in the middle of the pain and the suffering and the struggles and all of that. See, that's the meaning of the doctrine. The doctrine is not just intellectual understanding. Of course, it includes that. You know, in order for me to worship Jesus and surrender my life to Him as my God and trust Him in the midst of suffering, of course I need to intellectually understand. I'm not saying intellectual understanding is not important, but it's a part of it. It's a part of the overall transformation of life, and that is our goal. And so if our form of training, we end up with people who have lots of intellectual agreement with a list of doctrines, but their lives have not been changed, what have we accomplished? What have we accomplished? In fact, it's worse. We've actually damaged them.
Yes.
Because now they're thinking, because I got an A on the paper, and I can quote proof texts, and I understand the doctrines and the errors about the deity of Christ, that therefore I've got it. I'm in good relationship with the divine Jesus. And maybe they are, maybe they're not. Think about the devil. He is brilliant theologically. He has an extraordinarily accurate, seriously, he has a flawless, flawlessly accurate knowledge of all the doctrines we've never even heard of. Yeah? But he doesn't obey them. His life has not been changed. And I remember Tozer, A.W. Tozer, the great spiritual life writer. He wrote that, I'm totally paraphrasing here, he wrote something along the lines of, one of the biggest problems in the evangelical church is we have confused knowing about something with the possession of it. With the possession. We think because we understand something, because we know something, therefore we possess it. Just because I understand the deity of Christ does not mean I possess. It doesn't mean I've really got the deity of Christ, that I've really grasped it, that I really, big K, know the deity of Christ. Is that cool? So let me come back to the statement that the 5C4D training is actually the only way to accomplish that. It's not only possible, it is in fact the only way to properly teach theology, to properly teach doctrine. So don't allow yourself to come under pressure that 5C4D will be beautiful for life building and all of that, but we still have to do doctrine and theology the old traditional way. That simply is not true. And where that idea came from is Greek culture. And we'll look at this a little later. It's a profound, it is huge, the impact of Greek culture on the church, and in particular on training, and on even just our understanding of truth. It's huge. It could not be overstated. I've done a lot of work on this, not recently, but years ago I did a lot of work on this, and just the historical reality. It's very easy to demonstrate historically when this influence occurred. And it occurred in the first several centuries, where there were a number of Greek people who were steeped in Greek philosophy who came to Christ. And they brought in their Greek philosophical frameworks, and they intentionally, consciously, deliberately tried to integrate the Greek worldview, the Greek frameworks with the Bible, with the Scriptures. And as a result, they killed the church. They didn't totally kill the church. By the grace of God, the church didn't die, but it really changed. Thomas Aquinas, who is the father of theology, both Catholic and Protestant, was deeply committed to Aristotelian principles. He said so. It's not that, someone looked at his stuff and said, oh, there's a bit of influence of Aristotle here. He said he was. He said that his goal was to integrate these. It's quite amazing. The early guys back in the 2nd and 3rd century, they said that that was their goal. And so here's the thing about Greek culture. The passion of the Greeks was for knowledge. You remember the guys on Mars Hill? And what did they do? They just loved, sat around every new thing. Yeah, let's discuss this. Let's figure out that. We want to know this. We want to know that. A great passion for knowledge. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. The Greek culture became the foundation, ultimately, of Western civilization. And this is one of the great strengths of Western civilization, is the pursuit of this knowledge. And as a result of this, there are breakthroughs in whatever, everything, from medicine to, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not at all criticizing that. But the problem is when knowledge becomes its own end. And for the leaders and teachers of the Bible, knowledge was never its own end. Knowledge was a means to an end. What was the end? Union with Christ. Yeah. And it's amazing how in the States there's a prominent leader development ministry, and I visited them some years ago, and in there you walk into the place, and then they've got this huge library in the place, and they designed it that way. They literally want you to walk through the library to come into the just the room, the offices, and in the library they deliberately set up the library. So guess whose works were the first thing you see? I couldn't believe it when I was there. Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, literally, because they say these guys were the foundation of Western civilization. And so we want to study this, we want to know this, and we shape our Christian training along these lines. That's extraordinary to me. Look at the scriptures. Look at the words of Paul toward the Greeks. He was not kind toward them. Yeah? The Greeks seek what? Knowledge. The Jews seek signs. They seek power. But we seek Christ crucified. See, he contradicts it. He doesn't say, well, isn't this wonderful? And, God gave us Greek philosophical achievements and frameworks in order to help us be mature Christians. He contradicts us. He takes us away from that, and he brings it back to the experience of union with Christ, to the experience of union with Christ in his cross, in his death, and in his resurrection. So it's a profound thing, the influence of Greek culture. And our current theological approaches to training is essentially a Greek approach. It's a big, big problem. And we pay the price for this with academic achievement, but not corresponding life transformation in the graduates. And we all know this. Everybody knows this. Leaders know this all over the world. I mean, I don't know how many times I've heard leaders tell me, we sent our promising young people to Singapore, to Canada, to the US, to Britain, to Holland for theological training, and they died. And even if they maintained their faith itself, if they weren't sucked off into liberal theology or something, even if they maintained their faith, number one, mostly they never came back. Someone mentioned this the other day, just here. But even if they did come back, they couldn't do anything. They were no longer relevant. Their heads were full of all this information. This is one of the large networks, and he was in charge, the brother who was in charge of all of the training for one of the national networks, told me years ago, we have a big problem in our network because we have our young people in their 20s, we've sent them to these institutions, they come back with the degree, and then we have the older leaders in the church, 40s, 50s, 60s, the older leaders. The older leader has led perhaps thousands of people to the Lord, has planted perhaps dozens, perhaps hundreds of churches. My goodness. Has walked with God in humility, servanthood, sacrifice, intercession, prayer, tears, labor, suffering, terrible suffering. Has birthed, this massive, amazing thing with their tears, their blood, their labor, their faithfulness. But they've never had the chance to get a degree or to study the sorts of things that these young people have studied. All right, so that's the old people. The young people now come back from Bible school with, lo and behold, the piece of paper. Yeah? They have never actually planted a single church. They may not even have led anybody to the Lord. They've never seen the inside of a prison, but they've got a piece of paper. This is essentially what this brother told me, this older brother. Top leader of all training for this network. He was the one sending him overseas. Now he's telling me we've got a problem. But they've got the piece of paper, so they're qualified. Now, who actually is qualified? That could not be an easier question, yeah? Obviously. And yet, he said, we're now having this social disequilibrium in the network. We're having conflict because the young ones think, I've got the piece of paper, you don't have it, I'm more qualified than you are. My goodness. The older leaders, of course, what do they do with that? Because they're intimidated. Yeah? They recognize, so they're literate, but they're sure not academics. And here they are, they got the kid who's got a degree, they're intimidated by it, they don't know what to do with this. Wow. Big deal, big problem. And so as we're working on leader development, issues of leader development, and not just leader development, but what it means to know God. You only know God when your life is changed. Think about 1 John. 1 John. The whole book is how do you know God, right? How do you know God? What does he say? Do you love your brother? Are you walking in holiness? Have you been transformed, right? So, transformation toward God, change of my life from sin to holiness, transformation of my life and my relationships with others, from selfishness, hatred, to love and self-giving. Yeah? This is the meaning of 1 John. How do you know him? That's it. Life change. That's it. That is all that counts. It's not just that, well, that would be nice, but we really need people who, can write papers and pass tests. That's what's really important. Do you understand? The only thing that counts. Do you know God? You're walking with God, in union with Christ, in holiness, putting off the old man, putting on the new. This is all you see in the Scripture. You're loving your brother, patience, servanthood. Yeah? 5 C's, 4 facets. That's what the Scriptures teach. It's the only stuff that counts. But we've had this extraordinary, and it's been hundreds and hundreds of years now that we've drifted from that and embracing this intellectual academic thing. There are many around the world who are many church leaders and even many seminary leaders who recognize the lack in their graduates. Many, many. But they're not sure what to do. And after lunch, I'll tell you a story about our relationship with one very high-profile seminary in India with whom we've been working for about 10 years. I think it's more or less 10 years. Robert, am I close? More or less? About 10 years. Yeah, Robert's been heavily involved in this work. Now our friends from India are now going to Indonesia even, and have had a huge impact around India as well. But I want to share the story with you after lunch about how that happened, what we did, and what it where it's come to now. As I said, we're not going to just study this course. The whole thing of like helping seminaries to change, it's something I never really wanted to do. I've always been very happy working with church planning networks. I love doing that. Yeah, right, John? Working with the people on the front lines doing this stuff. I never had any sort of sense of one day we'll be working with seminaries and, you know, helping them to become transformational. Never really wanted to. I'm sorry to say that. Such a narrow heart. But I saw it as just this huge thing that'll never change. You know, I'm only got one life. I want to go where the action is, you know, and working with church planning networks, beautiful, fantastic. But then God brought us. He brought us into this. It was not that we thought of it and said, hey, let's make a strategic plan and figure this out. It just happened. And so we responded with responsibility and care and dedication to it. And it's really been a really quite stunning, actually. It's been stunning. So I'll share that story with you after lunch, and then we'll look at just some of the core facets of transformational theology and some tools, some practical tools that will help you to be able to do this. The thing with this is, it's such a big deal, and seminaries, you know, there are only a few people that can even work with them, that they will receive, that they will take seriously to be able to work with them. You know, we need to be looking to God, and we are in India. We're asking God to give us, we need at least one staff who will focus just on working with seminaries and will become expert in these approaches and tools and models and frameworks that God has given us over the years, and know how to come alongside seminaries and help them to find a place of change.
Now, then why do you think they're so resistant, the seminaries?
Yeah. John, honestly, it's an easy answer. It's because of all of the vested interests. Think of all the people who have jobs. Think of all of the scholars who have spent their lives rising to the top of the heap in this area, who have security, the honor, the respect, the fame, you know.
So it's become institutionalized to such a degree that it's just creates antibodies against
anything that will you know, threaten to change it. And if I've given my life and I've mastered, you know, this discipline after 30 or 40 years of work and sacrifice and experience and labor, and then, you know, some guy shows up with a whole new model, I'm not going to be begging to, you know, to learn it. And we've seen that. I'll share some stories. We have had some very fierce opposition. Sorry? You don't dismantle your own fort, no. So it takes a pretty big... It's self-perpetuating. You've got to just keep feeding the machine. The machine exists. We've got to keep feeding it, you know. And it's not just seminaries, but it's organizations of every kind. You know, you raise up the organization. There are so many people that depend upon that. And even if you've lost the vision, you've lost the fruitfulness, you'll still keep trying to reinvent yourself just so that you can justify the continued existence of the organization. organizational life cycle is very, very normal for us. We want to make sure we never do that, by the way. Yeah, Lord, protect us from that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and we hire consultants to come in to try to help us to find some new vision, simply to justify the continued existence of the organization. Yeah, you're just trying to continue. You don't want to give it up. But I have compassion for people like that, and I'm not in their shoes. If I was in their shoes, I would assume I would be the same. That, yeah, sure, I'd be willing to embrace a little bit here, a little bit there to sort of increase the quality, but don't expect me to do anything too radical. Yeah. So we want to have compassion toward our brothers and sisters who are in that situation. It's a big ask when we come in and say, here's a totally new, it requires a stinking amount of work to shift, which our friends at the seminary in India gave themselves to. Really extraordinary.